So again, today we'll talk about exploring frameworks. So what exactly are the frameworks for front end and back end? And then later on, if we have a time, we will discuss. I will introduce to you one of the front end frameworks, which is Bootstrap. So exploring frameworks. So just a review, while front-end web development is concerned with the designing of the user interface of the website using web technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc., back-end web development, or also called server-side development, is responsible for the appropriate functioning of the website. So again, this is just a review, while front-end is concerning about making how our website is going to look like. The back end is making the functionalities work. So basically, we're going to focus more on the functionalities of the website. So let's say, for example, Facebook. So Facebook has front end and back end technologies. For the front end, that's how we see it. That's what we are seeing on our screen. But when we use our Facebook, when we use Facebook on our phones or perhaps on our computers, whatever that we see on our computer or on our smartphones, that is using front end technologies. However, for example, post out picture. How exactly does the picture coming from your phone to Facebook works? Giyon sa siya nga na-transfer ang ang picture nga gikan sa imong phone padulong sa Facebook. That is how, or basically that is something that the back-end technology is responsible for. So basically, back-end technologies is for the functionalities of the website. So let's talk about some of the front-end frameworks. Now, there are tons of front-end frameworks, but we're just going to talk about at least a few. Perhaps what I think is the top of or the best used or most used rather front-end frameworks. So first of all, front-end frameworks can be divided into two groups. We have CSS frameworks and JavaScript frameworks. So in essence, let's just say first, unsa din ang framework, sir? I think I haven't really discussed what exactly that is. But when say frameworks, it makes, or basically these are a collection of pre-made codes so that we can use it in our program. That means frameworks are set of codes. Kumbaga, it could be either CSS, JavaScript, or any programming languages. Murag gi-code na siya daan. So basically, somebody else has already coded for you. And then all you need to do is just use those codes for your website. In that way, you don't necessarily have to constantly write the codes yourself. Mas sa'yo na lang ang web development, sa'yo na lang ang pag-design sa website. It's because nanadaay code, imo na lang siyang gamiton para sa imong website. So, how does that differ with, let's say, katong mangopya ra og code gikan online, nag-download ra og template online? Well, downloading website templates online, especially if you download it, it's supposed to be you have to pay for it. That's illegal, right? But frameworks are usually open source. That means it's free to use. Okay, so again, frameworks can be divided into two groups. Let's start with the CSS frameworks. In essence, a CSS framework comprises several CSS style sheets ready for use by web developers and designers. The style sheets are prepped for use for standard web design functions. Setting colors, it could be either setting colors, layout, fonts, nav bars, etc. Generally, style sheets are supported and expanded by other scripting technologies like SAS and JavaScript. Okay, so again, for CSS frameworks, basically nanay mga codes daan nga prepare, and then all you need to do is just use those codes for your website. Now, what kind of codes? Unsa lang na mga codes nga naa diha? So examples are setting colors. So, di ba? If you can remember, when we set colors last semester, how do we set colors again? Yun sa na to. For example, ganahan kong kolora na ako. For example, this is a website. What is kaning ako ang presentation kaning inyong nakita sa inyong screen. If this is a website, how yun sa nako nga makolora nako kaning word nga front end framework. Yun sa nako nga makolora nako siya kaning nga color. Let's say that color is for example, kaning nga color, let's just say this is sky blue. All right. Can anyone share yun? How am I going to set a color using CSS For example, this one, front end frameworks, and I'll color it with, let's say, sky blue. Anyone? Wala? Anyone would like to share? It's itong mga dagko grado last semester. Kaya na ba yung taga-agad kong grado? Wala? Makadug po na ako? Pero, sige. Dungog. Okay, anyone would like to share? Giunsa siguro pag-call. For example, this is a, this is a paragraph. This one. How did I add color, which is sky blue, if using CSS? Saan na to pag-add of color using CSS? Yan na lang. Sige, go ahead, Asibo. Hindi yun. Okay. For example, okay, it's okay. For example, this kaning particular element, let's say this is a paragraph. So we use the P element, right, using our HTML. So let's say front end framework. Okay, so using CSS, how am I going to add colors to it? Okay, it's okay. Limot ko mo. Alright, so let's say we'll call the element. So we have P, and then kana, diba? And then saan pag-add sa color? Text color? Font color? Anyone? Okay. But for example, this is our CSS na. Kani CSS na ni nato ni. Kani man ang text man atong butang nga color. Alright. Kitsa to? Yes, color. Alright. So for example, we'll write sky blue, or if you know the code, we will write the code. For example, because sure sa code, for example, this is color sky blue. Alright. So that's it, diba? So that's how you're going to add colors. So basically, that is how the CSS work. We have to write the codes on our own. So for example, if we will add perhaps ganahantang dako siya nga may mo siyang bold letters. So we will say font weight, and then let's say bold. So once we save this word front end frameworks will turn into a bold letter. Fine na. So basically, the essence of CSS is that we have to write the codes for ourselves. However, using CSS frameworks, we don't necessarily have to do it because it's already there. Nakabutang na siya sa CSS daan, sa framework daan, and all we need to do is just use those codes for our website. Alright, so we'll talk more about it later on sa atong Bootstrap lesson. So with a CSS framework, the user has a completed CSS style sheet, and they only have to code the HTML with accurate classes, structure, and IDs to set up a web page. The framework already has classes built in for common website elements like footer, slider, navigation bar, hamburger menu, column base, layouts, etc. So again, all you need to do is just use those codes for your website. Now, how are you going to use this? Unsa man paggamit tong mga code? You just have to write the correct classes or accurate classes or structure. Let's say classes or ID, depending on which is being used by the framework. So, for example, going back to tong game example kay na. So, let's say if you want to change the color of front end framework, we don't necessarily have to write this. It's because this is already written. Gisulat na siya daan sa framework. So all we need to do is, for example, nakabutang siya nga color light, or color light. Alright, so for example, color light kani siya nga codes na buta na siya sa framework, then all we need to do is nakasave na siya kani siya na siya sa framework. All we need to do to use this code, we just have to write the class name. So that means we have to add an attribute to our element that says color light. So let's say p and then class and then color light. And that's it. So instead of writing this code, all we need to do is just call the um, the class that is being used. So since nakabutang naman siya sa atong framework, atong buhaton is ato ra ng tawgon and we will add it in our HTML. So that's essentially how CSS frameworks work. Right. Advantages of using CSS frameworks. Developers and designers can use CSS frameworks to implement various advanced features and visual elements on a website. It could be either forms, different buttons, navbar, breadcrumbs, even clean symmetrical layouts. CSS frameworks make it simple to create websites compatible with multiple browsers and browser versions. This reduces the likelihood of bugs popping up during cross-browser settings. So most of CSS frameworks are basically tanan mong everything that you will be needing on your website is already been coded. Like if you would like to add forms, different color or different buttons, navigation bars, breadcrumbs, you name it, it's already there. Nakabutan na siya sa framework and all you need to do is just use them. And then CSS frameworks usually are built for multiple browsers. That means bisag mo gamit ka Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Edge, Safari, any browser, especially if they are most of the browsers are compatible, man. That means you won't have any problems with your website having any bugs or errors. And since these frameworks have ready-to-use style sheets in place, using them allows faster and more convenient web development. Users don't have to dive deep into CSS code to accomplish required tasks. So this is actually the main reason why gi-include nako ni in this semester's lesson is because we want to focus more on the coding. We want to focus more on the functionality of our website and dili na ta kinahanglan magsige coding o CSS just like what we did last semester, di ba? Hassle kayo to. So, karon para dili magdoble atong trabaho, we're going to focus our coding on the functionality, but on the designing part, di na ta kinahanglan nga mag-coding last time, di ba? Last semester, kinahanglan natong i-code ang atong design, right? If you can remember, kinsa pa. Okay. This time, we're no longer going to do that again. Meaning, we're not going to focus we're not going to focus very much on designing, but we're going to focus more on the functionality. So, for us to focus more on the functionality, we have to use frameworks because, again, it it allows faster and more convenient web development. Next, developers can quickly generate a user-friendly and visually appealing UI or user interface that can be modified throughout the project without starting from scratch. So the good thing about frameworks is that although nakasave na siya daan as a framework, you can still edit it. You can modify it. For example, na ay mga design nga dili ka ganahan, you can change it on your own. Especially you guys already have knowledge with working with CSS, diba? Right, that's it. So let's for the first framework that we're going to talk about. This is for CSS. We have Bootstrap, and perhaps one of the most used and kumbaga widely used framework, and one of the easiest framework to use as well is Bootstrap. Bootstrap is an open source CSS and JavaScript framework for making mobile first responsive websites. When we say mobile first, the main goal or basically the main purpose in mind for the Bootstrap is for the website to work on mobile devices. That means ang ilang pinaka-priority when using Bootstrap is to create websites that are responsible for mobile devices. Mobile devices like smartphones. And then it includes pre-made components like navbars, models, tabs, tooltips, buttons, carousel, accordion, and many more. Comes fully equipped with a responsive 12-column CSS grid system for layouts. Who can remember last semester, we've created 12 column CSS grid. Kinsa makainomdom ato atong ginabuhat nga grid before. Allow me. So if you can remember, basically in CSS, it's already saved. Na siya daan sa CSS, as I'm sorry, sa Bootstrap. So katong, okay, let me check it. Yes, it is 300 here. Okay, let me select one work that I've already graded. Tara, grade CSS grade layout. That is our last activity before the Super Typhoon. So allow me to share one. Connecting the picture. Okay, so this is our example, di ba? Last semester, we created the CSS grid system using CSS. That means we wrote the codes individually. So if you can remember, medyo lisod kaya siya in our part because we had to memorize a bunch of codes. Okay, so basically we've divided our the first thing that we did is we divided the entire screen into 12, if you can remember, and then we just spanned it. For example, depending on the size of the picture, we spanned it so that, for example, that's one right here. So maybe the entire screen is 12 columns, and then we divided it into, oh yeah, the entire width is divided into 12 columns, and for us to get the specific size of division, then we merged perhaps we merged multiple columns para mabuhat natin yung sa box, something like that. So it was it was a lot of work for CSS coding, but this time in Bootstrap we don't necessarily have to do that. Later on we'll learn how to use it. And then Bootstrap is also easy to customize and also ensures browser compatibility for supported browsers. So again, same thing. If you design your website using Chrome, don't worry, it will still work with Mozilla Firefox. It will still work with Edge and perhaps most other browsers out there. All right. So here are examples of Bootstraps. Basically, websites that are designed using Bootstrap. So here it is. You can find this website. This example of websites in the Bootstrap website itself. And later on, we get to create one of these websites. Mugamatag, maybe not exactly inani kanindot, but we will try to replicate or we'll try to create websites that will look something like this. Anyway, dili naman kita ang mo design. We just have to use the design that are provided by the Bootstrap already. Bootstrap advantages: rapid prototyping. With Bootstrap, there's almost no need to spend thought on tricky CSS positioning and browser compatibilities. So this is one of the challenges that we've encountered last semester. Kaya yung position. How do we make sure that the pictures will align, the text will align? Ganahan ko nga ipatunga ang text and sa una ko na there were tons of codes to do that, but in Bootstrap, we don't necessarily have to do it anymore. We just have to use the codes provided by Bootstrap. And then large ecosystem. As of today, Bootstrap has the largest ecosystem among front-end frameworks. The number of website layouts, themes, admin panels, UI components, etc. built using Bootstrap is mind-boggling and it keeps getting better. So right now, Bootstrap is currently on the fifth version. So ever since it started, from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so basically a ton of additional components has been added. Daghan ng mga additional nga mga elements and nagkanindot po siya. So expectedly, soon, once Bootstrap is upgraded, na po na yung mga additional na mga contents, mga components. And then, perhaps one of the most um, pinaka impressive advantage of Bootstrap is it is backed by Twitter. That means it is being backed up or supported by Twitter. So everybody already know what Twitter is, right? Kailan ba tanan kung sa ang Twitter? Batian ni magklase. Walay mo tingog oy. Alright. Please go and try to communicate kay bro na klase of uh, ghost ba. Anyway, backed by Twitter, an emerging trend in open source is the rise of projects sponsored by commercial entity. More often than not, these entities build profitable businesses around their offering. So basically, there are tons of frameworks that are also backed up by large companies. So we have here Kotlin. I haven't really heard that before. It is supported by JetBrains. We have WordPress, well, I've heard it before and I've used it before. It is supported by Automatic Incorporated, and then Angular, that is another framework, and it is supported by Google. React is also another framework and is supported by Facebook. So these frameworks are supported by large companies, and if they are supported by large companies, then it is mostly used by it is kuan kana ba ganing these entities build profitable businesses around their offering. So it so happened that Bootstrap is supported by Twitter. When a project is backed by an establishment entity and is not one person show, it gives faith to the community, especially the enterprise customers, that the project will have a clear roadmap and long-term future. And then, last, a large collection of components. Bootstrap offers out of the box almost all the UI component you're ever likely to need. So basically, everything that you will be needing for your website, well, most of the time, naa na siya daan sa Bootstrap. And all you need to do is just use them. So examples are navigation. So obviously, we always need navigation for our website. Now, if there are sometimes that we're going to use forms, we can also use the forms that are already designed inside Bootstrap. If you would like to use cards, cards are basically kanang mura siyang thumbnails ba. And then models, when you say models, pop up ng mga pop up ng mga elements, and then buttons, badges, progress bars, alerts, you name it, everything that you'll be needing for your website is already saved na na siya daan sa Bootstrap. Alright, another front-end framework for CSS is Foundation. So first we have Bootstrap, next is Foundation. Foundation calls itself the most advanced responsive front-end framework in the world. This responsive front-end framework provides a grid, HTML, SAS and CSS UI elements, templates, and code that covers navigation, buttons, typography, forms, etc. It also comprises optional functionalities offered by JavaScript extension. So Foundation is actually the one of the biggest competitors of Bootstrap. But about most web designer, when you what most web designers, if you're going to ask them what CSS frameworks are they using, maybe 50-50 will be using Bootstrap and Foundation. Formerly managed by Zerb, Foundation is an open source project that volunteers have run since 2019. It also operates with mobile-first approach and is particularly useful building large web apps requiring the design tools. So similar with Bootstrap, Foundation is also designed for mura priority gyapon niya nga mo design of website on mobile view. That means the website should work and will always work for mobile devices. So here are examples of website that uses Foundation framework. So maybe some of you have already seen this, but if you go to iStock by Getty Images website, basically that website is designed using Foundation framework. The Adidas website is also designed using Foundation framework, and then Vans website is also designed using Foundation. So maybe we already have an idea that Foundation is kwan gyud murag dako jud siya kaayo nga framework. It's because it's being used some of the biggest websites, biggest company in the world. We have Vans, Adidas, iStock, so on and so forth. Advantages of using Foundation It has a massive toolkit. Foundation offers more than what is required of a CSS framework. Its extensive modular collection of tools helps solve issues for most front-end developers. For example, it offers separate framework elements for website and emails, each prepped for functioning in those domains. I'm not going to bore you with the definition, but the general idea is that the advantages of Foundation is it has a massive toolkit. Same thing with Bootstrap, you can add lots of things on your website. And then greater flexibility, Foundation is built to offer front-end developers complete control over their UI. Basically, you can edit, you can design your website according to how would you like to do it using Foundation. Okay, UI components and beyond. Along with offering the standard UI components, Foundation also comes with responsive image system. So this is very important, especially kung gama ka kanan ka mo gama of image viewers or gallery on your website, and you want to make sure that it will work for properly for both PC and mobile devices. Then Foundations that you covered, and then training options. You can go on. Pwede kang train because Zerb, which is the company responsible for Foundation, is also offering training courses. All right, next, another CSS framework is called Tailwind. So, Tailwind CSS official documentation describes it a utility first CSS framework that comes with classes equipped with build custom UI designs directly in the user's markup. So again, I'm not going to bore you with the rest of the definition. You can read it because anyway, we're not going to use this in Tailwind. I'm just introducing it to you, so you'll have option. So for example, just in case once you graduated or perhaps naka extra gig, you already know how to design a website. You can either use Bootstrap, Foundation, Tailwind, depending on your own. So you can just read this. You can research more about Tailwind, but in general idea, this is just another CSS framework. And here are some of the websites that use Tailwind CSS. So webartisan.be, feeder.dk, Tailwind Themes, Pixelo, Laracast, Laravel. That these websites are designed using Tailwind CSS. Alright, Tailwind CSS advantages: it is highly customizable. It carries commonly used utility pattern, responsive made easy. So again, you can already imagine that these CSS frameworks made sure that the design that they are offering is are responsive, meaning it will work for both mobile and desktop computers. All right, next is let's go to JavaScript frameworks. If you can remember, front end frameworks can be divided into two. We have CSS and JavaScript. I'm sorry, CSS and JavaScript. This time, let's talk about JavaScript frameworks. So, the similar with CSS, diba? There's also frameworks for JavaScript. And in fact, sige na akong ginagamit. Every time that I'm going to design, and most of the time, dili ko mo gamit of JavaScript because dili ko kabalo. But in case I really have to use it, then I'm just going to use JavaScript frameworks. So what exactly is a JavaScript framework? A JavaScript framework is a collection of pre-written code built to support applications and provide benefit that plain JavaScript does not offer on its own. Since frameworks are built on top of JavaScript, you can achieve everything a framework does with a normal JavaScript. However, why duplicate all the effort when someone has already done the legwork? This points to the main benefit of using JavaScript framework: enhanced functionality without requiring you to write code from scratch. Now, unsa lang gamit sa JavaScript when it comes to designing. So basically, it just added more functional, not functionality, but more, let's say, amenities to your website. For example, ganahan kang imong website na asya mga animation, you can use JavaScript. You would like, ganahan ka nga ang yung imong website na ay mga kuan ba, kana something that will make your website um, more user friendly, and not really most user friendly, but well, something that will enhance your website's user experience. So that is using JavaScript. So there are tons of JavaScript frameworks as well, but here are the top three. We have Node.js. So it's a server-side JavaScript runtime environment which works on cross-platform and is open source. That means it's free to use. I'm not going to bore you with the details because, again, we're not going to be using this as much because JavaScript Bootstrap also has JavaScript. I'm sorry, Bootstrap is also considered to be as a JavaScript framework method. So here are some of the that uses Node.js. We have Netflix, NASA, PayPal, Uber, eBay, and many more. So another JavaScript framework is React. So this is what I've talked to you about a while ago. React is supported by Facebook. So it is created by Facebook. The React framework has earned popularity within a short period. It is used to develop and operate dynamic user interface of the web pages with high incoming traffic. So another website that uses React is, of course, we have Facebook, and then British Broadcasting Network or BBC. We have Script, Yahoo Mail, Dropbox, and many more. And then we have Angular. So this would be the top three JavaScript frameworks, and one of them is Angular. It is supported by Google. Websites using React, we have Google, Gmail, Microsoft, Xbox, Forbes, Upwork, and many more. So those are the front end frameworks. Let's talk about back end frameworks. So back end framework or server side framework is a library of tools modules rather that helps in building the architecture of a website. It significantly impacts a web app's performance and can decide your project's success. Back-end frameworks mainly help make tasks convenient and easy for developers. All right, so back-end frameworks, same thing with front-end frameworks. It makes the job of web developers much easier. So on the for the next few months, in our class, in this course rather, we're going to learn PHP, right? So we have to learn how to code PHP, how they work, so on and so forth. And we have to do it manually. We have to do it like code by code. However, back-end frameworks will help us will help us perhaps improve how we code our program. It's because basically same thing with front end frameworks. The codes are already saved in the backend frameworks, and the functionalities, the functionalities, how it works. We just have to call it. We just have to add it in our program, and then the functionality will be automatically added. So same thing, but we're not going to use backend frameworks in this course. It's because, well, we are IT, we are ComSci, and we are supposed to learn the hard way first before we will learn the easier way. That's the reason why I taught you how to code website manually like HTML and CSS semester, although na ay mga easier way. That is because we have to learn the hard way first before we will learn the easy way. So same thing for this course. We can just easily use backend frameworks, but we're not going to do that. We are going to do the hard way because you can just learn the backend frameworks on your own. So perhaps if ganahan mo mahimo yung programmer or mahimo mong web developer, you can just learn it on your own if you'd like to. So here's one of the backend frameworks. We have Laravel. Kinsa nakadungog na og Laravel? Dungog. So what do you think Laravel is, Mr. Asibo? Unsa lang siguro na. Sige. Alright, it's okay. So Laravel is a PHP framework. That means it will help us code PHP programs. So basically, if ganahan mo nga makatundayon o I'm sorry, if you want to create websites that uses PHP quick, then Laravel is the way to go. If you don't know, if gamay ra imong knowledge about PHP hard coding. But anyway, Laravel is an open source PHP framework that helps create symphony-based web apps by following MVC architecture. Experts rate it as one of the best frameworks for back-end development. Laravel offers many ways of using relational databases alongside app maintenance and deployment services. So basically, Laravel is um, a backend framework that will basically for PHP. So if you don't know how to code PHP or you have very little knowledge with PHP but you still want to create a website, then all you need to do is to learn Laravel because it makes coding or PHP coding much easier. So here are some of the websites that uses Laravel. We have Twitch, Warner Bros, Disney, the New York Times, and WWE. So these websites, these companies are using Laravel for their websites. And then we have Django. Django is a leading open source backend framework based on Python programming language. Now, if Laravel is for PHP, Django is for Python. Python is one of web development programming language. So Django is suitable for the development of sophisticated and feature-rich database-driven website and is one of the easiest backend frameworks. Django is considered as one of the best backend web development frameworks. So here are some of the websites that uses Django. We have Instagram, Mozilla, Pinterest, National Geographic, and more. So basically, the programmers or the developers of this website don't necessarily have to write the codes on their own. They just have to use backend frameworks. And for example, for Instagram, for Mozilla, Pinterest, and National Geographic, they were using Django. So basically, we can only imagine these websites are using what programming language? If they're using Django, unsa nga programming language silang gigamit siguro? Python. Okay, Python, it's because again, Django is for Python programming language. Next is we have Ruby on Rails. Ruby on Rails from the unsa siguro, what do you think would be the programming language supported by Ruby on Rails? Nanas ang halandaan, Ruby. Alright, so Ruby is one of programming languages for web development as well. So for web development, dili lang PHP, okay? Although PHP ang atong i-learn this semester, but PHP is not the only web programming languages for web development. So we have Python, Ruby, and many more. Even Java can be used for web development. Ruby on Rails, also known as Rails, is a Ruby-based server-side web application framework with MIT license. Rails is an MVC model. Let me look up MVC. It's model. So basically, um, it is a way. Sorry, it is a methodology in developing website. So we have RAD and we have MVC. MVC is Model View Controller. It's a pattern in software design commonly used to implement user interfaces. So basically, later on, you're going to learn about methodology when it comes to developing websites, and MVC is one of them. Ruby on Rails is one of the best framework for web development and considered by some developers as the best performance web work. So if you've noticed, ang Ruby considered as best, um, ang Django is also considered as the best, and Laravel is also considered to be as best. So basically, they are the best on their own programming language that they are supported. So Laravel is the best framework for PHP. Django is the best framework for Python, and Ruby on Rails is the best framework for Ruby. So here are the website that uses Ruby on Rails. So we have Shopify, Twitter, GitHub, and SoundCloud, and many more. All right, so that ends our front end and back end frameworks. Basically, exploring frameworks for web development. So there are tons of frameworks that will help us develop websites. So last semester we didn't use any of it. It's because we want to learn the hard way first before we will learn these new ways, the easier way, diba? Because we are IT, we are supposed to be more knowledgeable than other people who know how to develop websites. Now, since you already have idea what frameworks are and the best frameworks for different purposes, you can use it on your own. You can study in advance if just in case you want, if you really wanted to, if you really wanted to have a let's say career of being an IT. Since ni-enroll man jud lamang mong IT, maybe some of you will really want to have a career in IT. Maybe some of you want to be a graphic designer, some of you want to be an animator, some of you will be web designer, web developer soon. So these, for those who wanted to be a wanted to be web developers, these are the things that you will be needing. These are the things that you need to acquire expertise on. So if you want for easier web development, most of the time gugamit rin yung tag framework like CSS framework, JavaScript frameworks, and other back-end frameworks like Laravel, Ruby on Rails, Django, and so on and so forth. Because in real world, dili nam ta kinahanglan mo code because what most company will prefer the easier way, diba? So these frameworks will help us um, get to that position that will allow us to create website much easier, medyo mas nindot nga way and mas sayon and mas dali. Alright, so that is perhaps the main purpose of frameworks to make our jobs easier, faster, and more efficient. Alright, so any questions regarding frameworks, guys? Any questions? Wala? All right. Later on, we will have a quiz. I'm going to upload this kane getting a presentation file. We're going to have an assessment activity. But before that, we're going to discuss our next topic. So, okay, please understand that every time that we're going to have a class, from this point on, there might be a chance that we're going to have 2 lessons. It's because if you can remember in our curriculum, we have 5 hours, and since this is online, at least gama ra tag duha ka lesson na lang sa tibok semana. Right? And our next topic is we're going to learn Bootstrap. So again, Bootstrap is one of the CSS framework, and that is the framework that we'll be using for the entire the entire semester. So actually, again, this is front end technology, front end framework, but we're just going to discuss it para once we talk about, once we discuss about PHP, di na ko kinahanglan mo discuss og CSS at HTML kani agi na ta na before, di ba? So, para din ako mag-discuss of CSS, HTML, we're going to discuss um, Bootstrap. In that way, mas dali na lang ang pag-coding. Di na tayo focus sa designing because we are going to focus more on the PHP rather than the CSS and HTML. That be okay, guys? Okay, so let's proceed learning Bootstrap. Actually, to be honest, wala na ako naman ang presentation na ako for Bootstrap. So, medyo maputol rin siya ron. But we're going to focus more on the requirement, how Bootstrap works, and how are we going to use it. Okay, so let me share it again. Let me share my screen again. Slideshow. Okay. All right. Okay. For our next lesson, we'll talk about Bootstrap. So again, Bootstrap is one of the front-end frameworks for CSS, and that is the framework that we'll be using all throughout the semester for us to focus more on the PHP programming. So Bootstrap. So to get to Bootstrap website, you just have to getbootstrap.com, and you can learn more about it or basically download it on your device. Again, getbootstrap.com. So what is Bootstrap? We already talked about it a while ago. Let's just have a review. Bootstrap is a powerful front-end framework for faster and easier web development. It includes HTML and CSS based design, templates for creating common user interface components like forms, buttons, navigations, drop-down, alert, modals, tabs, accordion, carousel, tooltips, so on. Ooh. Alright, so if you can remember in our HTML CSS lesson last semester, bisag paggama lang gani og button, dugay kita mahuman because we have to code that there will be tons of codes to be used. Diba? Ka-remember mo na? Kanang mag-add lang gani og button, medyo madugay pa gani ta. Moadra ta og text, moadra ta og title sa atong website. Madugay pa ta. It's because we have to code it, we have to design it manually using HTML, CSS. Well, in Bootstrap, na siya yung mga design daan na naka-save. Basically, na sila yung mga design daan, and all you need to do is just select and use it for your website. So it's like, kinsa nakagamit na o Canva. Kinsa nakatry o Canva nga designing website or application. Wala. Si Miss Joyce. Nakagamit na ka Miss Joyce? Joyce ba to? Joyce, ano pala? Ah, okay. So, Miss Balak, would you care to share us how one? For example, if ganahan ka nga mo add of text, the first all you need to do is, or perhaps ganahan ka mo add of picture, di ba usually imurang buhatan is mo search ka picture, di ba? Search ka picture and then attach. That's That's right. Okay. So basically in Canva, na mga design daan, all you need to do is just use it. Use it for your design. Maybe if kanahan ka mo add og mga clip arts, na nagput sila mga clip arts daan, all you need to do is just add it, drag and drag it on your design. It's the same thing with Bootstrap. So, for example, ganahan ka mga buttons, ganahan ka og navigation bars. There are navigation bars already saved in Bootstrap. All you need to do is just choose them and use it for your website. So, in a way, mura gyapon siya og drag and drop lang. So that's the good thing about Bootstrap because we don't necessarily have to code them. We just have to look for the item or the component that we want to add on our website and then use the code and then it will be added in our website automatically. So Bootstrap gives you ability to create flexible and responsive web layouts with much less efforts. Bootstrap was originally created by the designer and the developer at Twitter in mid-2010. Before being an open source framework, Bootstrap is known as Twitter Blueprint. So it was initially used for Twitter. So later on, we will notice some similarities with how are we going to design websites with Twitter. So but let me show you. For those who haven't seen a Twitter website first, let me show it to you. And you will notice soon that some of or most of the Bootstrap layouts are similar with Twitter because basically the designer of Bootstrap or the designer of Twitter. Okay, so naikinahanglan ko din sign up. Alright, anyway, so this is the land or the sign in page of Twitter. However, I don't think na buhay pa to akong Twitter, so I'm not going to bother you with I'm not going to bother you with that. But anyway, you can just check it yourself, and then soon, once we already created our website, try to find similarities between the Twitter and the website that we'll be creating using Bootstrap. So there are a lot more things. So what you can do with Bootstrap? There are a lot more things you can do with Bootstrap. You can easily create responsive website. That is already given. So say when we say responsive websites, our website will work for both mobile devices and desktop. You can quickly create multi-column layout with predefined classes. You can quickly create different types of form. Alright? You can quickly create different variation of navigation bar. You can easily create components like accordions, so on and so forth. I'm not going to bother you with the details. You can just read it right here. And okay, the advantages of using Bootstrap. First is it saves a lot of time. Again, because we don't necessarily have to code everything just to make a simple component or a simple element to our website. We just have to use what is already been given by Bootstrap. So it saves a lot of time. Responsive features and consistent design. All Bootstrap components share the same design templates and styles through the central library. So the design layout of your web page will be consistent. So this might be, although this is an advantage, but this could be a disadvantage in a long run. It's because, for example, you are a freelance web designer and you will be building different websites for different clients. Most of the time is pareha-pareha lang ang ilahang itsura because they have consistent design. But anyway, you can always change it on your own mapod. That's the good thing about Bootstrap. Although nanay mga design daan, you can still edit it. And it's easy to use. Bootstrap is very easy to use. Anybody with the basic working knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript can start development with Bootstrap. Compatible with browsers, and of course, the most important thing is it's open source. That means it's free to use. Dili ka pwedeng kasuhan kung gugamit ka Bootstrap for free. Alright? So, this is how we're going to. So basically, this is getting started with Bootstrap. How are we going to use or install Bootstrap? First is we're going to go to bootstrap.com. So let's do that now. So later on, after this class, this is part of your assignment. I'll let you install Bootstrap on your website, on your phone or on your computer, whatever it is. All right. So get bootstrap.com. Here. So this is the website where we can download Bootstrap. Next, click on download. So let's click download right here. And then under compiled CSS and JavaScript. So there will be tons of options here. We're not going to talk more. We're going to talk more about it soon. But for now, let's just focus on how we get started with Bootstrap easily. And that will be using this. So under compiled CSS and JavaScript, click download. Okay, here. Once the download is done, obviously, you just have to open up your website. For example, kung ganahan ka nga mo-create a website here. Learning Bootstrap. Okay, for example, this would be my website. It's called Getting Started with Bootstrap. So, next is I'm going to open up the downloaded file. Okay? So, let me open up, show in folder. Open that up. Alright, so basically this is saved as zip. So that means we have to extract it. So to extract, you can either use WinRAR or the built-in extractor on your mobile device. And then click extract to, and then save it on your website. So in my case, it's in NORSU Bais 2021 second semester web development 2 and learning Bootstrap here. So to select the folder or your website's folder, press OK and wait until the extraction is done. Here, let me close that and let me get back to my website. Here, so here's my website, getting started with Bootstrap. When I open it up, you will see this Bootstrap dash 5.1.3.txt. So when you open it up, you can see CSS and JavaScript folders. So the CSS are the CSS codes. So for example, let's open up the CSS code here. Dara. So muna siya isulod sa CSS na bootstrap.css na file. So as you can see, there are tons of codes, and all we need to do, for example, ganahan ka mo gamit aning nga code, we just have to call the class name that is used. So if you can see pila ka codes, let me get down to the bottom. It has 11,266 lines of code. So yun na siya kadaghan. So basically, this is where everything is saved. Dili na kabutang tanda mga design, and all you need to do is just use those codes. Alright? So again, it is saved under Bootstrap. Okay, so my website is called Getting Started Bootstrap, and inside it we have the Bootstrap folder name. So I would suggest to rename it. Suggest ko nga i-rename it para sa'yo natong i-locate. So let's just say Bootstrap. Ano lang. So I'm going to rename the folder, save it as Bootstrap. Alright? So how am I going to use it? So now that I've already saved the Bootstrap in my website, again, the first thing that you're going to do after you download it is make sure that the Bootstrap folder is inside your website. And then next is connect the CSS files inside each of your HTML files using the link tag. So, unsa ang ginatuto pag-connect og CSS using HTML? You can remember? Hindi, unsa like code atong gamiton? Alright, it's okay. Okay, alright. So here's what we're going to do. So let me open up our code. So right now, please don't, guys, I don't kalibog, ano, if you notice, lahat ng text editor I'm using, because this time I've decided to practice VS Code. But you can still use, yeah, Notepad++, okay? Because that's much easier, especially if you're using um, low-end computers, or perhaps if you're using phones, just use the trap edit. But notice, medyo lahi ako. Just don't mind the IDE that I'm using. Just mind the codes. So again, since we've already, okay, let me close this. Let's start from the very beginning. Uh, File, and then open folder, and then all right. So this is my website, and we will create here a file that says index.html, right? Index.html. So this would be my index file. All right, and then let's open up in our VS Code here. Okay. All right. So let's call it. Let's add a title. Let's say, "Getting Started with Bootstrap." Okay. So again, how are we going to add CSS files again? Saan ito? Okay, link. All right. So link, rel style sheet. Then let's just then href. Right. So actually, guys, I encourage you guys, if you really wanted to focus more on coding, I would suggest to use VS Code really, because as you've noticed, di na ko kinahanglan mo type tanan. So I just type link and then enter, and then it will automatically type in for myself. Bantay mo? So let's start over. So for example, let's start new. Let's start new. So if you can remember, starting a new HTML file, daghan kay kang code ibutang pa doc save, head, title, and it would really cost a lot of time. So, but using VS Code or Visual Studio Code, it will allow us to basically it will do those boring things for ours for kuan ba. Sila na ang VS Code na mo bahala ana for us. So for example, ganan ko mo create a basic HTML5 document, and I'm just going to type doc just like that, and then enter. Here it will automatically type it myself. And then for the link, same thing, you just have to type link, enter, set link rel style sheet href, and then let's go back to our Bootstrap here. Nakabutang siya sa Bootstrap na page, and then CSS, and we want to connect one of the CSS file inside Bootstrap. So let's open up Bootstrap and then CSS. So inside Bootstrap na ay CS and JS, right? So let's open up CS, and then here, notice the very first line is bootstrap.css. So actually, although daghan kayong mga codes, daghan kayong mga CSS files here, we don't necessarily have to use them for now. We just have to use the main one, which is the bootstrap.css. So how are we going to connect this bootstrap CSS to our website? We will need to use the link, and then href, and then sa lang ganito, we have the folder name, which is bootstrap, and then CSS, and then bootstrap.css here. Ano lang. So once we've connected it, so we have style sheet, href, bootstrap, that is a folder. CSS is the folder name again. Let's review para dito maglibog. So we have Bootstrap and then CSS and then bootstrap.css. So that's why we have Bootstrap, CSS, and bootstrap.css. So that's it. We'll save that and then perhaps let's say hello world. Let's save that and then let's check it. Okay. Alright, anong na ay let me take the muna tagamit ko sa kuha na ni programming no. Alright. Let's check Bootstrap here. Okay, so notice unsa siguro difference. What would be the difference before, if you can remember, if tangtago na to ang connection, if we're not going to be using Bootstrap, what would be the unsa difference guro ani ug katong usual nga hello world nga atong buhaton if wala taga use of Bootstrap? What do you think would be the difference? I think that's the fun. So let's go back to our code and then let's try to remove this down. Let's try to remove our connection. That means you're no longer using Bootstrap. And then let's reload. What would be the font? What do you think would be the font that would be saved? This is the default one, which is NA Times New Roman. Alright, so by default, if we're not using Bootstrap, the font that it will use is the basically this is the default one, Times New Roman. But if you're going to use Bootstrap, the default font is different. So let's go back. Let's add our Bootstrap again. Let's reload. Here it is. Okay, so this is just a kuan. This is just a sign that we are already using Bootstrap. So we know for a fact that our CSS or our HTML is now using Bootstrap. Alright? So obviously, we're not just designing this time around, since we'll be using framework, we're not just designing to create a hello world, right? So let's get right into it. So what are the things that we can add using um, using Bootstrap? So let's just go to Bootstrap website, and there we can find the documentations, or basically the things that we can find are the things that we can, or the components that we can use on Bootstrap. So again, let's go to getbootstrap.com and then let's go to documentations at the top, na docs. And this is just for me to show you how Bootstrap works. So again, once you get into the website of Bootstrap, click at the top na ay docs nga makabutang kana, meaning that's documentation. Makita ba? Okay, go to docs. All right, and here are the instructions, or basically the user manual how to use Bootstrap. And then let's go directly to let's say components. Actually, it would be best if we will read each of them, but this is just an overview para mapakita lang na ko ninyo how frameworks, how Bootstrap works, and then we'll get to it one by one. Let's just start with how it works. So go to components, and then let's say ganahan ko nga mo add of navigation bar. Ganahan ko mo add of navigation bar in our website. What am I going to do? So go to components, look for nav bar. Here it is. All right, that's it. And then here are example codes. So for example, if ganahan kang kaning navigation bar kaning a particular design. So how are you going to do? You just have to copy this. You just have to copy that. And then let's open up our codes again. And then inside the body, let's remove this. Let's paste it. That's it. Let's save that. And since we've already connected our CSS, our Bootstrap, since we've already connected, let's save that and let's reload. That navbar should automatically be saved, just like that. See? Kita ba? All right. So before we have to code it manually, di ba? But this time, the only thing that we did is we copy the link. We copy this. Basically, this is already a design designed by Bootstrap. We just copied it and then we paste it in our code. Just like that. We paste it right here. We reload our website and it's already right here. Now, this is to give you a proof that Bootstrap is mobile first. If you can remember, one of the most challenging part of our lesson last semester is turning our website, this website, into responsive website. That means we have to make sure that our website will work for mobile. Muna pinaka-challenge na ito last semester, di ba? Kaya nag-design pa tag website pagkuman, mag-design pa dyan ta para sa phones. So, medyo nadulit ang trabaho. Now, Bootstrap, we don't necessarily have to worry about that in Bootstrap because it will automatically be designed because again, Bootstrap is mobile first, meaning its focus is its priority is making sure that the website will work for mobile. So if we're going to check inspect element, here it is. So notice that it's already responsive. Nana siya hamburger buttons dayon. So let me check. For example, we will use iPhone XR. Alright. Alright. It's okay. Wala pa siya ni work. It's because, but right now, you notice the difference, diba? It's already responsive. Nakabantay ba mo? So this is the desktop view and this is the mobile view. So wala na tayong gibuhat. We just copy the codes provided by Bootstrap. Alright. So one more thing that I would like to add though is the use of JavaScript. So notice, if i-click na ako ni, dili siya mugana, it's because the functionality of this code, in our last semester, ang functionality sa ato ang kaning menu button is using CSS, but in Bootstrap, it uses JavaScript. So for us to use the Bootstrap or the JavaScript capability, we have to add the JavaScript as well. So how do we add JavaScript? Here. To use the JavaScript files, always include it at the bottom of the page right before using body tag to improve the performance of your web page. So that means we have to include it. Let's try. So it says here, before the body, we'll include the JavaScript. And notice that, let's go back to our folder. Inside Bootstrap, naatay JavaScript folder, JS folder. So when we open it up, it also consists of tons of JavaScript files, and we just have to use. Let's just use one of them. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, it usually is the one na pinakadako of code, pinakadako file size. So okay, so we will use Bootstrap this particular JavaScript now. Let's just try bootstrap.bundle.js. So how do we connect JavaScript to our website? Here, before the body, we will type script src, meaning src is source, and then let's add this. For example, let's just add this two na lang. I'm not sure which of these to use, but let's add both bootstrap.bundle.js and then bootstrap.js. So for the source, unsa siguro ato butang dire, we have bootstrap and then js and then bootstrap.bundle.js. All right, and then let's add another one for the second one, and then bootstrap.js and then bootstrap.js. Kana. All right, so let's try. Let's save that. Let's reload our website. All right, here. Since we've already added the JavaScript, the functionalities are now full. So let me reload that back. So gain na dili mo gana ni, at this time mugana na siya. And na siya mga drop down as well. All right. So that is basically JavaScript for you guys. You don't necessarily have to do it manually on our own. We just have to do it ourselves. Now, another concern maybe is, although we can use, what if na ay mga things, what if there are things that we want to change? Di ba dita ganahan sa design nga provided by um, by Bootstrap, what are we going to do? So that's the time that we're going to apply you're going to apply your knowledge with CSS here. So let's go back to our file and we will add, okay, we will add another file. Let's call it style.css. All right. Basically, you can still add style. Basically, you can still apply your knowledge with CSS and add configuration, or you can edit it on your own. So it would be best if you add the um, you'll add a separate CSS file specifically for your own modification. So if na ay mga components nga di kaganahan, then you can just create one yourself and then edit it. So how are we going to edit? For example, we want to change the color kaning navigation bar. Ganahan ko nga ang color niya is let's just say for the sake of this lesson, let's just change it to something else. So we will change the color of the navigation. Actually, to do that, it's easy. Let's go back to our HTML. So if you notice, na ay nakabutan rin, the first, inside the body, the first line is navbar. So here are the class. We have class, and the class name is navbar expand large, navbar light. Actually, if we're going to change the BG light to BG dark, I'm sorry. We'll save that. Let's reload. It will automatically change to dark, something like that. So wala na tani change sa CSS mismo. We just change the class name. Anyway, we'll talk more about it later on. So it's okay. Let me just show it to you na lang before we proceed. So to do that, let's go to customize and then color. Okay. And then here are the colors that are usually used by by Bootstrap. So we have primary, secondary, success, danger. These are theme colors. Nasa itong background. I'm not sure as ang background colors. But it's okay. Let's get back to it later on. But anyway, what if out of those colors provided by Bootstrap, wala jud imong ganahan. So you can always do it yourself. So let's open up CSS. And then let's call the CS or the class atong tawagon tong class na we want to change color. So here, what do you think would be the kuan? Here are the class names. Unsa na to nga mapa-change nato ang color? Let's say we'll change it to red. So for us to change the navigation to red, let's call in the very first. Let's try the first division that we will see, the class. So we know that we want to change the navigation. Kani, we want to change the color. So all we need to do is just use its class. Kung say class nga yung gigamit, so it says here it uses nav. Taas kayo yung class name. We don't necessarily have to write the entire thing. We just have to write the first one. Okay? So we will write nav. And then let's say nav. I'm sorry. Since it is class, what do you think would be the selector that we'll be using? Since class man siya, unsa siguro nga selector atong gamiton sa atong CSS? Anyone? Anyone? Dot. Nalimot? Napapitaw? Alright, ay kalimot guys, bye. Alright, it's okay. Since we are using class, that means we will use dot. What if it's ID? Unsa atong gamiton? Kung ID siya. Kung ID ni, unsa atong gamiton dire? Can't believe it. Guys, it's hashtag. Alright, so if it's ID, we will use hashtag. But if it's class, we will use dot. Alright, so but before that, we have to connect our style.css. So the same thing that we're going to do, we will use the link, and then I'm sorry. All right, and then let's add style.css. So for us to change the color, for example, let's write background color, to, let's say, red. Let's save, and then let's reload. Oops, nav bar. Mhm. Nav bar. How about let's set it to mm, VG like. For some reason it's not working. Ah, there. Hold on. Style.css. Style.css. For some reason it's not working, but it's okay. Let's get back to it later on. But anyway, that is how the Bootstrap works, right? So we just have to find the component that we would like to add in our program or in our website, and then we just have to add it. So let's add another component again. So I'm thinking I would like to add a carousel. So what exactly are carousel? Here it is. So carousel are mura siyang slideshow of pictures. Mura slides of pictures. So let's say for example, we'll try to use this. This is how it's gonna look like. Kana. So this is a carousel. So if we would like to add that in our website, we just have to copy this. Kana. And then let's go back to our codes and let's add it here. Alright, so let's just add a comment that says a carousel. Let's save that. Let's paste. And then let's replace the pictures. So to add pictures, let me add pictures to my website first. So we'll add picture new folder images, and let me add pictures from my folder. Okay, here I have three pictures and like to add it now in my website. So let me rename this real quick. Parang sa'yo na 1.jpg, 2.jpg, and 3.jpg. Alright, so we've already copied the carousel codes from Bootstrap, and then we just have to replace the pictures. So let's look for the image. Tara, image.src, let's replace it with the picture. So for the first one, let's say images slash 1.jpg. Let's do the same thing for the second picture, images slash 2.jpg, and then images dash 3.jpg. Alright, di ba? Ato rang gi-copy ang code from Bootstrap, and then since blanco ang yung pictures, we just added the pictures ourselves. Let's reload, and then let's save that, and then let's reload here. Okay, so the pictures already added. Now let's check if nabadyo siya carousel. That's it. So notice nga na siya slideshow of pictures. Alright, so that is carousel. So let me add another component. Now how do we edit this? For example, dako ra kayong picture, sir. So I think we can change that as well. So let's go back to our code, and then let's open up our CSS. Um, okay, let's try carousel, and then let's set the vertical height, height. Let's set it to, let's say, 50 VH, meaning that's 50% vertical height. Let's see if there are any changes. Okay, and how about, okay, how about the carousel inner? Okay, here it is. All right, so we can change the height of our carousel as well. So again, diba, you can always change it yourself. So in our case, we changed the carousel inner class. So you've noticed one of the classes inside the carousel is called carousel inner. So we just have to change that. Instead of having 100% that dako kayo siya, pwede natin siyang pagamihan. So to do so, we open up our customized CSS. We called it kana, and then we set the height to 50 vertical height. So instead of having a full picture, we just have 50% of the carousel. Right? So again, Bootstrap is still customizable. Next, what about if we're going to add accordion? Let's try to take a look what accordion is all about. So this is an accordion. That one. Kita ba mo? Alright. Alright. So this is an accordion. Basically, if you kita mo accordion instrument, so basically magana na ba? So every time that you're going to click a link, it will drop down, and then the other drop, the other divisions will go on, will expand. What's the opposite of expand? Decompress. Sa to ba ni shrink or something? Okay, so every time that you're going to click a section, it will expand. For example, here we have three sections, and every time that you will click it, it will expand, and then the rest will shrink. Right? So that is an accordion. So all we need to do is just copy these codes. We'll copy that, and then paste it on our website. So let's add another comment here. Alright, and let's say this is, sorry, for, yeah. Let's paste it right here. Let's save that.